guest today has an impressive list of degrees spanning a number of fields, including chemistry, law, bioinformatics, biology, and microbiology, where she studied the replication of coronaviruses. We spent the majority of this episode covering viruses, origins, the spread, as well as human evolution and politics. Here's a fantastic conversation with my friend, Lisa Sardinia. All right, well, to start, can you, in a very simple way, explain biology?
No. Biology, all the ologies are studies of. So biology is, it's the study of living things. And I would say an awful lot of biologists are people who just want to understand how it works, sort of pull back the curtain.
How living things work.
Living things work. And all the way from in a very artificial system in a lab to what's actually happening in that forest.
Okay. And so what area do you specialize in?
Microbiology.
Okay. And so what is that?
It actually, it's a joke, but it's the study of small things. Okay. So people who are microbiologists study viruses, bacteria, yeast, often the kinds of organisms that you can't see without a microscope.
Okay. That's a very simple way of explaining it. Great job. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on COVID, but I think we're going to have to. I think everybody's kind of sick of it, but I think it's worth noting that you study viruses.
I am literally a coronavirologist.
Yeah. And
my Ph.D. thesis was on coronaviruses. Yeah.
So this means a lot. This means a different thing to you than everyone else the last 3 years.
Yes. When I first heard, that when we first got the first reports, I just thought it was mildly interesting because that was my virus. And they're, I hate to say they're a really cool virus, but they are. They have an interesting genome. Their genes are organized like no other entity on Earth. The way they replicate is somewhat unique. I just said somewhat unique. And so I was just interested scientifically. Then when it blew up, it wasn't.
Well, how are they different to other viruses?
So viruses can be classified in a number of different ways, but viruses can have different kinds of genomes. So our genomes are DNA. DNA is our genes. And there are some viruses like that, but there are RNA viruses, and some of them replicate in the host cell's nucleus, and some of them insert their genes into the host cell's chromosomes, and some of them replicate in the other parts of the cell. And they just do it differently. But the coronaviruses are an RNA virus, and they have, we usually think of genes as being pieces of DNA. And this is pieces of RNA, but they overlap. They just have one RNA, and the RNAs, the genes overlap. It's what's called a nested set.
Okay.
And I don't know any other. I know this. No other viruses really do that.
Okay. So in the early part of 2020, when you saw this in the news, did you have any idea that it could become what it did?
Yes, I did. And I was somewhat worried that it might, because it didn't appear as though people were understanding how quickly a respiratory virus that isn't enormously deadly can travel. The only reason we don't have Ebola everywhere is that it kills people too quickly. And it sounds terrible, but they can't get very far. But if you can be infected by a virus, travel all over the world, spewing out virus for days before you even know you're sick, that goes worldwide fast.
So if you're looking at it from the perspective of a coronavirus, the reason that they are not successful is that they don't kill you fast enough.
No, that's why they are successful.
because they stay in your body so long that you can transmit
Yeah.
it. But then not as many people are going to die as something that would kill you quicker.
Great.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a host, the best parasites, and viruses are parasites, don't kill their hosts. They keep them alive a long time so that because that's the only place they can replicate. You can't grow viruses like on a petri dish in a lab. They can only grow inside the cells of living organisms.
Well, what
living
about
cells?
What about the talk of labs where they're growing these viruses in order to study them?
They are growing them. They're growing them in human cells. So people have set what are called cell lines that were, you may remember the there was a big story about Henrietta Lacks. This was a woman in the 50s who had cells removed because she had cervical cancer, and they started growing those in the lab, and we still use them, these very same HeLa cells. They're immortal.
Why don't they just get new cells? Why do they keep kind of using hers?
Because their cancer cells are immortal, and so you can just keep them around for a long time. Getting new cells and getting them to grow in cell culture is a little bit tricky, but once you get a cell line going, you can keep it going for decades.
Wow.
And you can find cell lines so we used ones in our lab that were particularly good at growing coronaviruses and some other viruses as well, but different cell lines can be used for different things, but they still have to grow inside living cells, not just streaked on agar.
Okay, so all of these labs where they are cultivating different viruses, they're using human cells, or are they using rat cells or other mammal cells?
Yes.
Yeah?
All of the above.
Okay.
In our lab, we were studying canine coronavirus, a dog, feline, porcine, pig, and bovine, and human. Mm-hmm. So we had several cell lines depending on which coronavirus grew best in that cell line.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't want to quote you because you probably don't know the answer to this, but there is the possibility, very strong possibility, that there are nefarious sources growing growing viruses in these cells all the time, and that potentially gets out.
Certainly, it's not easy.
Okay.
So this is not probably something somebody is doing in their garage.
No, I'm saying
but are there labs? Well, first of all, of course there are labs that are studying all kinds of viruses that cause diseases, right? Are some of them also trying to make bioweapons? Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like any other kind of weapon. There are people doing that. And I know there are people who think that that's what happened here. It is possible that it escaped from a lab, which is not the same thing as creating bioweapons. When you have infectious viruses, they can escape. When I was in graduate school and we were working on coronaviruses, including some human coronaviruses that cause colds. That's it. And so we were careful, but we weren't in the whole suits or anything. And nobody got sick, but I'm pretty sure we all were infected by those viruses that we worked with. Huh. But most of them don't grow in humans. So infection just means they got in you and maybe infected a cell. It doesn't mean that they got any farther than that. Huh.
It's very dangerous. I understand why bad people would want to do it. I understand why good people would attempt to do it, but it's so dangerous to be messing around with stuff like that could potentially wipe out the human race. And you're just tinkering with it incrementally in a lab.
Yes.
And then somebody does something wrong.
Yes.
And then it screws everything up.
Yes, it's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
Studying them. So we weren't tinkering with them. We were trying to figure out how they replicate. One of the reasons that we got a vaccine so quickly for this is because people had been studying coronaviruses for decades. They knew everything about them. And all the proteins that are there, what kinds of things, how they attach to human cells. If they didn't know that, it would have taken a lot longer to come up with a vaccine. So I think studying them is important. it can be dangerous, but we didn't do any of the what's called gain of function studies where we're trying to mutate them. We were just studying the viruses as they existed already.
Can you explain that for people? Because that's a headline. I don't think anybody really knows what it means.
Sure. Particularly for viruses, every virus, again, viruses can only make more viruses if they're inside another cell, right? So they have to infect that cell. They have to have that cell's machinery, cellular machinery, make new viruses for them that kind of take it over. And all viruses have what's called a host range. They can only attach to certain cells, maybe in certain species. So like plant viruses can't infect humans because they attach to different proteins on the cells of plants. So the genomes of viruses are so much smaller than even bacteria. It's fairly straightforward to be able to modify them, to cause mutations, to change them. That's not that difficult to do. Often all that does is screw them up so that they don't replicate anymore. But you could possibly insert a new gene that allows it now to bind to different kinds of cells. So you could, I don't think you can make a plant virus into a human virus, but you might be able to take a bird virus and now make it be able to infect mammals like humans.
So gain of function means changing it so that it could work across multiple different types.
That's one possibility. Yes. So that would be a gain of function because it's now doing something it couldn't do before.
I see.
Maybe you could make it replicate faster. Maybe you could make it cause latent infections so that, like chickenpox. If you get chickenpox when you're a kid, that you get chickenpox, you get better, but the virus genome is still in your cells. It's just incorporated, and that's why you can get shingles later. It's really just chickenpox for grown-ups. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps that would be a gain of function, allowing a virus that once your immune system got rid of it, it's just gone. Maybe you could give it a gain of function where it could incorporate into your genome and be latent as well.
And so with all this stuff that was happening and with your history and knowledge on coronaviruses, did you think at any point that it was going to wipe out the human race? Did you think it was that serious?
No.
What did you think it was going to do?
Just what it did. I thought so. I thought it would spread because nobody was really serious about stopping it. It could have been stopped, but decided not to do that. It would mutate because it was infecting so many people, and it's what's called a naive population. This is a novel coronavirus, and nobody had had it before. So you didn't have any leftover immunity from something else, although it's not entirely completely different from any other coronavirus, and everybody's had coronavirus colds, so maybe there was a little cross-reaction, but there was going to be this worldwide population that it could just infect. And it mutates fairly quickly. It just does. That's just, it's just not, it doesn't have as much fidelity when it copies its own genome. And many of those mutations would make it less infectious, less virulent, less bad. But some of them would make it more infectious. And those are the ones that win. Not deadly, more infectious. If it can pass from one host to the next, you're going to have more of those because by definition, it has to go to another host. So any mutation that made it easier to hop from one host to another, we would see more of that. And that's exactly what we saw. It killed a lot of people, but it didn't kill a lot of people. That's what I would have expected with a coronavirus.
It's easier to look at it with hindsight and with everything that we know now, but it seems like there wasn't much focus on health and becoming healthy and exercising and eating right. It was all just about stay inside, which looking back on it now is counterintuitive. So it seems like they came at it the wrong direction.
Maybe. I've had some I was going to say arguments, but I'm going to say discussions with people whose plan, they really weren't interested in the vaccine. They were going to healthy their way out of this. Great idea to be healthy. Great idea to eat well, get enough sleep, reduce stress, get exercise, all that stuff to make your immune system at its peak. Viruses, the generations of viruses are so much faster than humans. They will always outrun our immune system. Until about 100 years ago, the leading cause of death of humans was infectious disease.
Well, smallpox.
Worldwide, everything.
Smallpox killed hundreds of millions of people.
The bubonic plague is the only time that the Black Death is the only time in the history of modern humans that the worldwide population of humans went down so much you could see the dip. Mm-hmm. They win because they replicate so fast. They could just there'll be variants that can evade our immune system. Still good idea to have a great immune system, but the reason people don't die of infectious disease all the time now, there's three things. It's clean water, antibiotics, and vaccines. That's it.
But with the vaccine for coronavirus, for COVID-19, the hope and the way it was explained is that it would eradicate it. And that turned out to be not true.
I doubt that it was explained that way by scientists.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee it was not.
Yeah.
There was a chance for a while. Here's the deal: because viruses can only replicate in living cells, if they can't, if the host dies before it passes on, then that's a dead end there. Or if a person who gets COVID isolates and then gets better, then the virus that was a dead end. And the more dead ends you have, the greater the chance is of eradicating it. So if you shut down, if you isolate, and you vaccinate so that you have a bunch of people who are immune, even if they're not, this is population level now. You don't have to have everybody be immune. You just have to have enough people be immune and not too many people interacting, and it would stop passing and it could be eradicated. Too late now, but.
So you think the correct action should have been that everybody hangs out in their house for 3 weeks at the very start of it, and it would have disappeared?
It's hard to say. It might have been twice that long, maybe not 3 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, but everybody worldwide had to do it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It might have. It's because things like this have happened before. There are other viruses that blow up like this, and they kind of slam it down quickly, and it doesn't get worldwide. This happens all the time with outbreaks. Mm-hmm. And this one, I don't know. Well, I'm not sure why people didn't take it more seriously. And there was a whole lot of we're going to close the borders, but we're going to wait a week till all the U.S. citizens who are abroad can come back to the U.S. So then as soon as I heard that, I was like, well, okay, never mind. We're done.
They're all going to bring,
yeah. That's right. And they're all going to come into crowded airports as everybody's trying to get home. Yeah.
Well, the disappointing thing is that this sets a precedent for when it inevitably happens again. And
yeah. I don't quite know what the answer is here. So, except that the infectious disease will get us. We don't have humans don't have a top predator, right? You may have people have sometimes heard about this, even if they're not biologists. There are these predator-prey models where you have some place where there's like a lot of rabbits and they start breeding, and then pretty soon the population of foxes goes up because there's so much food. But then foxes start reproducing. They eat too many of the rabbits, and so the rabbit population goes down. But there weren't any predators for rabbits in Australia, so they gave them rabbits, and there was too many rabbits. Skunks is my example. So do you know what the top predator for skunks is?
Badgers or something? Nothing?
They taste as bad as they smell. And so the only creatures that will eat a skunk are starving. It is the last resort. And yet, do you see a lot of skunks?
No, I was just going to say there's not that many skunks.
Okay. So what keeps that population in check? When the population of skunks gets fairly high, it's much easier for infectious disease to decimate that population, knock it way back down. That's what keeps skunks in check, is various skunk viruses. Huh. And now we're at 8 billion people on Earth and no top predator. What will keep the human population in check? Infectious disease. And it won't wipe out all the humans. We'll just have wave after wave where a few tens of millions of people die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, to me, and I'm not a proponent of this, but it sounds like a different form of eugenics. It sounds like it's the way of cleansing the people who are not quite as healthy. I mean, it's evolution.
Oh,
Is it not?
If only that were the case. It is a type of eugenics, but not eugenics exactly. There are people guaranteed that are naturally immune to, not because they have good immune systems, because they have a gene variant that makes that little protein that the virus binds to, it's just altered. So they don't have to be healthy at all. Best example of this is HIV/AIDS. There are some people way back in the 80s who were saying we should be looking we shouldn't be studying, sounds terrible, the people who have HIV. We should be studying the people who've been repeatedly exposed to HIV and don't get it. And I mean, we're talking about unhealthy people. We're talking about intravenous drug users. So we're not talking about healthy people, and they just didn't get it. How did they not get it? Now we know they have a variant, a genetic variant, like having type A blood or type B blood or blue eyes or brown eyes. They just have a variant, and HIV can't infect their cells. Just literally cannot.
So is that how they've created the drug that gets people through HIV? Is by somehow mutating? No?
No, they just just inhibit parts of the cycle.
Well, you heard about that guy in China who infected I think it was two babies with some sort of...
He changed their genes to, he says, have them that gene variant. It's not perfectly clear whether it actually worked. And he's not infected them with the virus to see if it worked.
Yeah, that's the only way to find out.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. That's horrible.
Exactly, it is. And so in almost any population, for almost any infectious disease, there will be people with variants, genetic variants, that don't have to do anything. That's just part of their genes that makes them not susceptible to a particular virus. So yes, there's a genetic selection, not necessarily for the healthiest people, just the people who happen to have this genetic variant.
Well, and the thing about that is that if a certain type of virus or a certain type of bacteria can come along and kill certain people with that gene structure or whatever, then it isolates a certain type of person, and then they are more like each other. And then if something came along, it would wipe out all of them, right?
You're really good at this. This is actually what's happened to humans. Humans are about one of the most genetically non-diverse species on Earth. We're not quite Florida panthers, but if you just go to Africa and start sampling zebras, they're not 99.9% genetically identical to each other. We are, because there have been a number of these what are called genetic bottlenecks, where only a few people made it through whatever. And so, yes, it is possible, I don't know how likely it is, but it is possible that a single virus could wipe out humans because we are so genetically similar. It's like when we talk about monoculture crops, how dangerous that is, because humans are that. Mm-hmm. We are so narrow. We have very little variation. There's a little, though, and that's probably nobody knows why some people haven't gotten COVID yet. Because it's some unvaccinated people, they've been, there are people who have never isolated, never worn a mask, are not vaccinated, and they haven't gotten COVID. Why? Don't know.
Well, I thought that was because maybe they had it and they didn't know it.
It could be, or maybe they can't get infected.
Yeah, that's got to be a pretty small percentage of the population by now, right? It seems like anybody I've talked to has had it somehow. You haven't had it?
No? No. Not that I know of, right?
See, that's the thing, and you can't...
I've done a lot of testing because various times when I've had to test to be certain places and give presentations. If I did, it was asymptomatic, which it could be. So I know I am one of the people. And so I either haven't had it or I can't get it or I'll get it at some point. But it is the case that the percentage of people who've been infected, which doesn't mean they got it overt disease, the percentage of people on Earth who've been infected is massive. And so I don't know that we'll get rid of this virus. It could become endemic rather than epidemic. And it's just around all the time. But there is one other problem with coronaviruses that we've known for a long time, and that is, for reasons which are not perfectly clear, there are some ideas of why it might be. Getting infected with a coronavirus does not lead to long-lived immunity. Like if you get measles once, you won't get it again the rest of your life. Yeah, that's not true for coronaviruses. I guarantee you've had colds caused by coronaviruses over and over and over. It's about 2 years, maybe.
So what is the benefit of getting booster shots over and over and over again?
That's exactly it.
If it's just going to continue to mutate.
That's why you need them. It's why you have to get a flu shot every year.
But I never get a flu shot.
Well, I got the flu once and now I get a flu shot. Huh. It was that bad. It's about the only time I ever got close to calling 911 for myself because I couldn't breathe. Huh. Yeah, so now I get a flu shot. But that's why we do it. Because
but you can still get the flu.
I can, but it's much less likely. And if I do get it, it's likely to be less severe.
Severe, okay. Yeah, because that's the thing that I don't quite understand. If it's constantly mutating, there's no way for you to ever fully be free of it.
Oh, absolutely. The microbes aren't going away.
But I mean, if the flu strain is different every year, you could still get it no matter what.
Okay, so with this new type of vaccine, that's going to get even less likely. So the way the old-fashioned flu vaccines took a very long time to create and prepare. So you had to pick what you were going to use months before the flu season started. You had to make a guess about what it would be because it just took so long to create them. You had to grow them in eggs and do all this isolation. But the RNA, these RNA vaccines, it is a few weeks. And you could possibly switch it like halfway through the flu season if you saw that there was a different mutant. Because the way they're just the best vaccines ever. So cool, so safe, so effective. The way that they are created, synthesized, allows you to modify them really quickly and then make a whole bunch of it really fast. I remember when people first started talking about this is the other thing. People have been working on RNA vaccines for a decade as well. It's not brand new. And actually, they were working on them for flu.
Okay, so why is there so much hate for RNA? Why do you hear so much about how negative it is?
I don't know exactly. I don't know. I truly don't know. There was, some, I think years ago, there have always been people who didn't like vaccines, anti-vaxxers, and they would all just talk to each other in that little community. And now, right, anybody could say anything, and millions of people can hear it pretty quickly. And there's a number of people who like to believe in all kinds of conspiracies. And some of those same people, I don't know what they just decided this was actually gene therapy. Again, maybe they could take a biology class and learn how it's not. But yeah, I'm not sure why. I don't really get why this particular vaccine.
Well, it has something to do with manipulating your genetic code. No?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. No, this gets a little bit complicated, but your genes are DNA, and they're in what's called the nucleus of the cell. It's a little, sac in there. And then a copy of each gene is made into RNA, which gets sent out to the cytoplasm. Doesn't go back. It's a one-way trip. Okay. So the way the RNA vaccine works is it's in a little vesicle that fuses with your cell. So now that RNA is in the cytoplasm where it's supposed to be. Doesn't go into the nucleus and mess with your genes. Stays in, and it just gets used to convert into proteins that are viral proteins, not the whole virus, just the proteins that the cell can then put on their surface to say to the immune system, see these are bad. You should make antibodies to them. Okay. I hate to say it, that cell is going to die. That cell that's why your arm hurts so much, I think. A few cells will die.
Just a couple.
But you've got about 50 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
So you could probably, you could probably.
Well, you have cells dying all the time, don't you?
Correct.
Yeah.
And these are a handful of cells that might get destroyed by your immune system because your immune system is thinking, oh, it's a virus infection. We should kill that cell. And then they have these memory cells afterwards. So if you ever see it again. But no, it does nothing to your genes.
Okay.
Nothing. And it disappears because RNA gets degraded by your cells. The entire vaccine has disappeared within 24 to 48 hours after your shot. It's gone.
It does all it needs to do within that amount of time?
Yeah, it triggers the immune response. That's what it needs to do.
And then there's no trace of it in your body.
Right. This is what I'm trying to say. But because it kind of mimics a virus infection, because the virus would send RNA in there and make proteins. It would make a whole virus particle. This only just makes a few proteins. But because it kind of mimics the way a real virus infection would work, sort of, it triggers a better, more effective immune response.
Okay, so be a mad scientist for a second. How would somebody use this negatively? Negatively.
Use this negatively.
All these people that say it's such a horrible thing.
I don't get it. Wow, what could you do? Well, it wouldn't be a vaccine. I mean, you could put, oh my gosh, I don't know. I guess you could could you put an RNA in the vesicle, get people to sit down so you could inject them with it that produced a protein, just the protein that was toxic. It would be easier to just poison people. This is a hard way to do this. I don't get it. I was so shocked when I heard that. The only thing that I thought is the previous president of the United States they were talking about, what was the name of the project, whatever, but it made it sound like it was all happening very fast. Right. And Warp speed. When I first heard it, I thought, I don't know if I want to be one of the first people. And I've volunteered for vaccine trials before. But then I read more about it and I realized it's not new at all. There's so much research into this. All they did, they had all of this. They just were waiting for the sequence of this particular viral protein to put in there. There'd been some trials. It wasn't that fast. Okay. It just wasn't. And then a bunch of people volunteered for the first trials, they had more people in the trials than has ever been in a vaccine trial before. We got a ton of data. And then we heard people saying, well, we don't know what the long-term effects will be. Well, kind of by definition, there aren't long-term effects of vaccines. All of them go away very quickly. There can be side effects from vaccines. There have been people who have died from vaccines. And you will know that within days. Okay, maybe a few weeks. That's it. There just aren't any long-term effects because they're gone.
So you think that some form of virus will be what brings us down? You think that's what we're looking at?
Yes, and not because it will kill all the humans. If you look at what COVID did to the worldwide economy, that's what will happen. You don't have to kill everybody. You need to disrupt things enough. If you had in the United States 100 people with Ebola who all ended up in hospitals, those 100 hospitals, let's say they went to different ones. I don't know why they're all spread out. They would have to shut down because it's so deadly. There's all these downstream effects. You could destroy a society long before you've killed everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I think the biggest thing that we're fighting with that's destroying society is mind viruses.
Exactly.
I mean, it's pretty easy to poison people's minds right now.
It is, and so we can move into the sort of political realm. But here is a deal. If you think about this. The fear response in humans is pretty strong. It evolved. There was a lot of natural selection to have a really good fear response. If you weren't afraid of the saber-toothed tigers, there wouldn't. If there wasn't a good fear response, there wouldn't be 8 billion people on Earth right now. Many of us live in such security and safety. We might not think about it, but we're not attacked by saber-toothed tigers all the time. We're not just open to the environment all the time. So that fear response is strong. And if you get a political party that decides that is the best way to get people elected is to trigger that fear response in people.
Yeah, I think
that works pretty well.
I think people also don't, because we're not running away from the saber-toothed tigers, we're searching for meaning in different ways, and life is really not that hard. Compared to every other person that's lived in our history, our life is very easy.
It's unbelievable.
We're just looking for conflict all the time. It's gross.
Again, if you want to set people will argue with this, and I don't really care. Let's set anatomically modern humans at 250,000 years ago, okay? Or more or less. I don't want to get into an argument about exactly when humans that are, had language and were sort of like us. Let's say 250,000 years. For most of that time, and I mean 99.99% of that time, and still in many places, survival was tough. Not just the saber-toothed tigers. Getting enough calories to exist till the next day was not easy. Just survival. And there was fighting other organisms, including other humans, for those resources to live another day. So what happens over time, there's selective pressure for the behaviors that allow people to survive and reproduce. That's how evolution through natural selection works. So the ones who survived weren't so fearful they couldn't do anything, but they were pretty darn alert and they were pretty aggressive. And now suddenly, stop doing that. Mm-hmm. Stop being fearful. Don't be aggressive. There's calories everywhere. You're warm. You're happy. You should be happy. Everything is fine. But that's all still there. All those gene variants that led to those kinds of behaviors were there and selected for millions of years. And now in overdeveloped countries, they're not as useful. It's sort of it turns out the genetic variants that lead to a susceptibility to type 2 diabetes are actually found in most humans because they're really advantageous when you don't have very much food.
Yeah, something
but
about
now they're not.
Fat calories,
Yeah,
sugar calorie. What is it?
Yeah. So again, when you are trying to survive, fats and carbs are great, right? You want lots of fat and carbs because you're not going to, who knows when you're going to get your next meal. Also, you're going to eat yourself silly when you got that mastodon or whatever, you're going to eat yourself silly. And it's good to pack on pounds because you may have to lose them. But when you have just a constant supply of calories, those aren't really good strategies any longer.
No, and it makes me wonder too if we're not creating more mental illness and more depression and more psychological issues because we don't have anything to do. We're just like trying to find something to do.
I sometimes think about that do you suppose that Paleolithic humans sat around being depressed? Well, those people died very quickly and did not reproduce.
Yeah.
Anxiety, yes, but the anxiety was for a reason, right? And you did something to kill that mammoth or, and eat it, right? So, we have these. We still have all the stress chemicals, the ones that were fabulous for running away from the saber-toothed tiger, but we don't have anything to do with them. They come up when somebody cuts you off in traffic, but then there's nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a pretty weird spot to be in where we have things so easy, but no one's happy. Or relatively speaking, no one's happy. It's like, I don't know where it goes. And that's like, I guess like the ongoing conversation I have with everybody. I don't know where it goes right now because things are so good, but they're also so bad.
We may be heading into a scenario where some of those behaviors become useful again as it becomes harder to live, as the temperature goes up and crops die. And this may have been just our little golden spot here, and we might be going off the other side. I'm not a doomsayer as like, we're all going to die, but things happen. And global warming is a thing, and it's accelerating, and a lot of the places where people live will not be livable anymore. We will have climate refugees. This is going to happen. And I sometimes I get this, but I sometimes think when you hear people say, well, the seas will rise by a foot, whatever it is, by 2050. I think people think that everything will be fine till 2049.
Yeah.
But that's not how that works, right? But this is another thing too. Humans are not good at long-term planning because we never had to be. We just had to make it another day. It was such a big deal to get to the next day, the next week. We didn't have selective pressure for planning 50 years ahead.
I think things accelerate so fast technologically, we can't perceive it's kind of like when you say Elon has $150 billion. No one knows what that means. That is a ridiculous amount of money. You can't fathom what it is. No. So when somebody says the sea will rise a foot by 2050, that seems like a million years in the future.
It is, yeah. And again, there was no selective pressure to be able to think that far, to plan that far ahead for humans. There just wasn't. Mm-hmm. You never had to do that. Also, you didn't have to do that because there weren't very many humans, right? 8 billion is very different than 8 million.
Well, yeah. I don't think we're designed to experience this thing with this many people.
No, we were we're villagers. We really are. We're villagers. And we try to make villages, right? Even in our cities. We try to recreate our, people call it tribalism, but we're really good. Really good. There's no conflict, but up to maybe 500 Everybody can stand there and vote, right? We're good at that. You'd know everybody. Sounds weird. And then you could work with other little villages. But those kinds of numbers, 150 billion. It's sort of like when I talk about infectious diseases. When I say how fast they mutate, how many there are, the numbers don't even make any sense, right? They're just not, because we're not talking about billions. I mean, in a drop of water, I'm sure this water is fine, but in a drop of water, you can have, it's not billions or trillions or quadrillions or quintillions or sextillions of bacteria. And it would still look pretty clear.
Our bodies are just so good at filtering it out, it doesn't matter?
Yes, there's a couple of things there. We do have that acid in our stomach. Plus, we have our gut microbes, right? Our own personal microbiota, without which we could not live. And they fight a lot of them off for us. They don't like outsiders. Mm-hmm. And we have an immune system. I'm not too happy with people who say, I don't need to ever take antibiotics or vaccines because my immune system will kill everything. It's like, well, no, that's not true. But it's not bad. That's why there's 8 billion people on Earth. Mm-hmm. It's not bad. But evolution through natural selection it is not working towards something that's the best. It's just good enough. And that's exactly what our immune system is. Good enough. It's okay.
Well, it's kind of depressing to say it this way, and this is how I always say it. The Earth doesn't care. The Earth will go on for 6, 8, 10 billion more years. Mother Earth does not care about us. No. We are not important. No. And I don't think people fully understand that.
There's a couple of things. One is I kind of really don't like the we have to do these things to save the Earth. The Earth will be fine. We cannot really destroy the Earth.
No.
We can destroy us. And I do think, and it is very hard, this is such an existential thing, but I think there are a lot of people who truly can't fathom that the species, Homo sapiens, could go extinct.
Oh, we absolutely will.
Oh, yeah, because every species goes extinct at some point. We have some that are pretty old, but they all go extinct.
Well, and see, I'm not a proponent of not saving the sea turtles or whatever, but a part of me is like, they're not going to make it forever. I'm not saying go to the beach and punch them in the face, but they're not going to make it. Everything's going to die.
Right.
You can't save everything.
Right.
It sucks to say it that way, but it's true.
I find it, is it distressing when there are species that have now gone extinct because of the stupidness of humans. It's just like, we just don't, we're just going to kill them. I don't quite get that. Now, here's a true statement. In order for us to live, other living things must die. That's the second law of thermodynamics requires that, except for a few bacteria that can live on rocks. But everything else, that's how it works. You can choose. Some people get like us, we are in fact quite wealthy. If you think about the world, we are very wealthy. You probably get to choose what you eat. So you could choose to eat plants. They're still living things that died so that you could live. That's just the way it works. You can't not have that happen. There's no way around that. You can't be a breatharian. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, I mean, that's the argument against vegans. You still, like you said, you got to eat something that's alive.
So my argument here is, but maybe we don't need to foul our own nest. So some of the ways we obtain our food are actually going to accelerate the eventual extinction of humans. Maybe we don't have to do some of the things that we do that are causing so much more methane to go into the atmosphere, and it's sort of accelerating. Also, not just the extinction, but it's not going to be pleasant.
Yeah.
So vegetarianism, eating this, it is maybe just be a little more thoughtful about what the consequences are for us.
Yeah.
I sometimes, so I don't eat meat. It's just, there's a whole
That
bunch of
comment
reasons.
wasn't an attack on you.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm not one of those people who, attacks other people for what they eat most of the time. And, like if somebody serves meat, I can eat stuff that touched it. I just get to choose what I eat because I get to choose. And so I eat the things that I like for a variety of reasons. Not sure where I was going to go. See, I got off on that tangent about why I'm. But people can eat all kinds of different things around the world and not have such an effect on the planet. This idea that Americans need to have infinite numbers of $1 hamburgers is not going to do well for us. Has nothing to do with being vegan or not. That's just not going to work.
Yeah, it's really a consideration of supply and demand. And if everybody switched to vegan tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to grow enough plants. There's just too many people.
That is actually not entirely
You think
true.
we could grow enough plants to feed everybody?
Well, most of our plants now go to not humans. They go to non-human animals who concentrate it, and we get far less food out of those animals.
Sure.
But, and again, I'm not vegan. So I think that people should think a little bit more about, because plants aren't the best protein source necessarily. There's lots of protein in plants, and Americans eat way too much protein anyway. But there's a lot of good sources for protein, insects. And I don't eat insects because I'm squeamish, but I've eaten, chips. I've eaten food made from like cricket flour. Tastes fine.
I've been listening to some things recently about eating bugs, but then you get into, if you eat all the bugs, then there's going to be too many aphids because the bugs eat the aphids. Like the food chain is what it is because it is what it is.
Yes.
So you can't. It's kind of like when if you go to your house and you kill all the spiders, then you're going to have other bugs because you kill all the spiders.
Absolutely. I think here what you'd have to do is farm them. Mm-hmm. So you would not be taking them from the environment. There would still be bugs in the environment. You would grow bugs not in the environment, not out in the world to eat. Rather than, I don't think hunting and gathering of crickets is going to work.
Wow.
I don't know, but again, part of the problem is there's a lot of people. There are a lot of people.
I've been reading things lately, though, that they're concerned that the population is going down. And that seemed to blow my mind.
There are a few people who are concerned about that. A lot of people are not concerned about that. The people I've heard who are concerned about that are often the people who have a lot of money and they make money off of selling things to other people. And they want more people to buy their stuff.
Yeah, that's an inherent issue in the system that every year there has to be positive growth.
Which that I don't. Are there people who don't get that's not possible?
Yeah, you can't do
for
that.
Infinite forever. You can't. There's nothing. It is humans are so strange about this that everything has to be bigger and better and bigger and better and more.
It was a good system for 100 years, but now
But even then, no, it's never been. There has since. So not when we're talking about, a few people in villages that were hunters and gatherers or maybe pastoralists. But since there have been cities and economies, it has never worked. It has always been boom and bust. It's always cycle after cycle after cycle. But this time will be different.
It changed, though. I'm trying to think. I want to say the Industrial Revolution. Seems like it was different before then.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, and that was what, 1850s, 1860s, yes. 70s, somewhere in there.
Right. And people, urban became the thing instead of rural. I mean, and it took a while to get the complete changeover, but that's when it changed. Yes.
Well, and that's also when wealth became more concentrated.
Of course, yeah.
Before that, I mean, there were rich people kings and queens and stuff like that. But no, you couldn't be a rich, regular person before the Industrial Revolution.
No, not really.
Yeah.
You had a few leaders, that had wealth. Even then, the concentration of wealth is nothing like it is now, right? It just wasn't. First of all, there wasn't as much wealth because there weren't as much. There wasn't as much stuff. People were still trying to get food. That's what most of everything was.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you were a blacksmith or whatever it was, or a farrier, or whatever you were, a mason, it was still all about getting food. Most people were employed in growing food, animals or plants. That's what most humans did until the Industrial Revolution, and for a while after. That's what most people did.
Yeah, I mean, it just gets into like the really philosophical question of what is it? What are we doing? And at that point in time, there was no reason to really learn anything. I mean, you could have the desire to, and maybe you could find a book somehow or something, but really all you had to do was get food and not die.
Yes, and it is, yes, that is true. There's one thing I think that is kind of interesting, is that if you look particularly, even I was going to say in the last 2,000 years, there have been a number of amazing inventions and discoveries and inventions. And I think some of it had to do with people had time. So my brother, who is a veterinarian and a college professor, but he also farms with draft horses. And when I say farms with draft horses, I mean they don't have motorized farm equipment.
Tractors, yeah.
So when you are plowing or haying with horses, you do a couple rows and then you just have to stop because the horses have to, take a break. And you sit there. You just, for hundreds of years, you didn't play on your phone. You just sat there. And a lot of people sat there and looked around, and some of those people said, if we just did X, Y, or Z, this would be better. That's how all the non-motorized equipment got developed, is people actually think, just because they had time, because of the way things worked. You couldn't work that fast. It wasn't until their factories that people worked frantically because you couldn't. And that's when people came up with all the principles of mathematics, for crying out loud. So much of the astronomy that we know, because they had time, and they thought stuff up. And then a few people took that, and then we start getting factories, and it seems like a good idea at the time, and then maybe it goes too far. I don't know exactly, but
there's no way to really stop any of that.
No,
it's the nature of humans is to constantly get something, to constantly accumulate or at least achieve, and I don't know that that's bad.
No, and again, for most of modern human history, you had to get. It was food most of the time, and clothes. That's all. That's what you were focused on. You needed more. There was never enough. Never enough. And again, that's still here in our heads. It's just what we get now is a lot of junk to put in our front yards at Christmas, I guess. But you have to somehow, and our economy is now built on that instead of on food.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest issue is that things are profit driven, and that's what I always say is that you cannot fix anything unless somebody can make money off of it. You can't fix the homeless problem unless somebody can find a way to make money. You can't fix global warming unless somebody makes a lot of money. There's no real incentive for anything to happen. That's what it's all driven by.
I think that's
Money and
right.
power.
And it actually is one of the things that annoyed me a lot. When I was taking environmental law in law school, which was a terrible class to take because, boy, is that depressing. But learning more about the early environmental movement, and I'm talking about in probably the 50s, 60s, early 70s. So there were people before that. But many of the early environmentalists were white males with money. They didn't have to get a job. They had a trust fund. And so you get people who wanted to preserve nature kind of for themselves. There didn't have to be a profit motive because this was their thing. And so we were going to save spotted owls. And they didn't, first of all, think about any marginalized populations at all. They didn't care anything about what was happening in poor neighborhoods. They just wanted, Yosemite. And they ruined the environmental movement because they pitted it against the economy. And I like spotted owls, so I don't want them to go away, but you can't tell people who actually aren't making enough money to feed their children that they have to care about a spotted owl.
Yeah, life is about priorities. And
there are many people on Earth who are still in the same place as our ancestors. Right? They're all over the Earth. There are people who are just getting to the next day, to the next day, to the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't be bothered with the beauty of a national park just for that. And unfortunately, I feel sometimes like it's too late to undo that, because if the first environmentalists had sold this as this is going to help you if you change the way you are logging or whatever, you can make more money because the trees will grow better the second time. It's sold it that way, profit motive, instead of there's these little fish in the Klamath River that everybody should care about. And I have the luxury of caring about them, but not a lot of people, not everybody does. Mm-hmm. So that kind of annoyed me about that. And I think it's too late. Now it's too late. You can't undo all of that bad feeling towards the environmental movement.
It's a tough situation. Plus, everything just gets politicized. And like you said, the majority of people don't have time to really care about things because they got to make money to feed their kids and pay their mortgage or whatever.
Yep. And buy more stuff. That they're convinced to buy. Because I live out in the country and we haven't had television for about 15 years, no streaming. We had no.
What do you do?
Well, we just got our from Elon Musk. We just got our Starlink.
Nice.
Dishy McFlatface. And it's been really nice for work because there were times when it was so slow I would have to drive all the way to work to check my email. It's ridiculous. And now I can do all this stuff at home. But we have television again, which I haven't had for 15 years. And I like sports, so that's pretty fun. Wow. There's a lot of commercials. I remember commercials, but wow.
They're coming back. I don't think they're in Netflix yet, but they're on a bunch of the other streaming services.
We have just like YouTube TV, and we don't pay any extra for not having commercials. But I can imagine how dissatisfied you would be with your life if you watch these. It's like, man, my house should be better. My car should be better. This is, I am falling behind.
Yeah, the ability of the geniuses behind any marketing to make you think that you need something.
Oh, yeah.
They're so good.
They are.
Yeah, it's unless you're really paying attention and thinking about it. I'll catch myself sometimes. I'll be like, I don't even need that, but I really want it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is an interesting thing. And it has become, because I'm old. I remember the commercials from the early 60s where they basically just came on and told you about their product. And the the learning curve of advertisers about how to manipulate your thought has certainly evolved in ways. You're right. You're just like, no, I'm immune to this. It's like, oh, wow, look at that. Yeah. It's, and even on NPR, you hear them talking about, well, the economy is picking up because people are consuming more. And I just think this is not the way this is going. This
NPR,
cannot work.
They're not immune to any of it
No,
either.
no. But when I hear that, it's like, wow, everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid now. That is the only way we can succeed, is to have people buy stuff, more expensive stuff, work more to get more stuff. I don't think that works long term.
Yeah, I don't know that it does, but it permeates everything, and it changes too for the next generation. And that's the thing that I've been grappling with recently is I feel like you purposely try to distance yourself from your parents, and as soon as your parents like something, it's not cool anymore. Like I always think of Facebook. Like as soon as your grandparents got on Facebook, like Facebook's not cool now.
Yep.
And it was, I mean, it still is one of the largest companies, but at one point it was like one of the most important companies ever. There's all this focus on distancing yourself from those that have come before you. The generational changes are so great. And I mean, marketing plays into that too, because there's different ways now that I don't fully understand that you can target kids.
Oh, I'm shocked at the targeted. I mean, because when I was a little kid, there were commercials, before about 2 weeks before Christmas that would show a bunch of toys. That was about it. That was the entire targeting of children. And some sugary cereals. It is amazing, and it is everywhere. Right? I mean, it's embedded in all the social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all over the place, and because people are so connected to their individual devices, because things can become targeted specifically to you, it's almost like we're on a new frontier for a lot of that stuff. Because, like you said, years ago, you may have only had 3 networks, NBC, ABC, CBS.
Oh, that's right.
And if you wanted to sell a product, you had to get it on one of those. Mm-hmm. And now it's so weird because you're fighting for people's attention. I mean, that's really what it is. You're trying to get someone's attention. But the ability of that algorithm to specifically point to you with all the data that they have is a really weird thing.
Yeah, you used to have to broadcast it out to everybody and hope that it hit your target audience, and they would do, there was some, it's like, well, Lawrence Welk show, mostly it's older people, or Captain Kangaroo is mostly it's younger people. But now it's very narrowly focused so that people don't even have to hear it if it's not targeting them. Mm-hmm. Then when you click on that, they get that right away. When I was a kid watching television, they didn't know who was in the room and if you were paying any attention. But now you click on it, so they know you paid attention to it, and they'll give you more of that.
Well, that's the scary thing about what Meta is doing as well, is they'll track your eyes while you're wearing the glasses, and then they can accumulate data on that and figure out what you looked at.
Right.
Which is an insane level of technology to be able to tear apart a human mind and figure out what they like based on where their eyes went.
Go. Well, and they were even doing that before that, in that you didn't have to click on it if you were pausing.
Yes, YouTube still does that. Yeah, for sure.
And it is funny because what I look at, I get, because I click on things and I get more. Apparently, I don't click on the things that send you down the QAnon rabbit hole. I get roller coasters and dogs.
Well, that's good.
It is. And I watch them during faculty meetings because they make me happy. Although it doesn't sell me very much stuff. So I'm pretty much not their target audience. What's amazing to me is how much money is spent on all of that. And I realize it's the profit motive, but if you took you just need a little bit of the money that is going towards the development for all of these kinds of devices and ways to track people, you could, in fact, probably solve homelessness, and you could solve a number of childhood diseases. Mm-hmm. It didn't give nobody any money, so it won't happen. All I'm saying is it's stunning to me how much money is spent on the development of those types of technologies.
Yeah. The priority structure is kind of messed up. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense how we have $60 or $80 billion or whatever they sent to Ukraine when we have people sleeping in tents in downtown Portland. Seems like there's always money for the things that can allow profits for other people. It's kind of like when we were given, I forget what the number was. It was like $2 trillion during COVID and all the PPP loans and all that kind of stuff. There's always money for specific things, but then when there's like a real societal issue, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yes, and this is I think that there's a lot of advertising, if you will, on this. So we'll send money to Ukraine because they're fighting Russia, and we don't like Russia. Homeless people, let's be honest, they probably deserve it. I'm sorry. I think there's a lot of people that they don't like it, and we should help. Like if there's some families out there, we could help them. But the drug addicts, and there's a lot of people who feel that if you are addicted to anything, okay, maybe it's a disease, but it's probably still your fault. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to. Why would we give money to we? Mm-hmm. Because I just feel like there are a lot of people who still think that there are people who are homeless because they just want to be homeless.
That is true for a very small percentage. I'm sure there are some people who enjoy it, but no, the majority of people sleeping on the streets are mentally ill.
Yes.
And
this one we can lay at the feet of, because I was living in California at the time, Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
So when I was living in Berkeley, the People's Republic of Berkeley, it was after this. But when Ronald Reagan was the governor of California, there was a push to get people out of mental institutions. I'm a fan. That was not a great thing to have all of these people being put in these institutions where things weren't so great. So the idea was we'll take a bunch of those people who are not as seriously ill, and we will return them to more community-based care. There will be halfway houses. So everybody said, this is a great idea. So closed a bunch of the institutions, released all these people, but then there wasn't money for the community-based treatment or the housing for people because that just didn't happen. And homelessness blew up in California.
Well, I wonder what his incentive was. What did he think? Why? He thought people would enjoy that he was doing the right thing. He was trying to open up those mental institutes to be other types of businesses. I don't understand what his motive was.
I don't know, but closing the mental institutions, they were all publicly funded.
Yeah. Oh, it was tax dollars.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then not going to spend tax dollars to do anything afterwards. And then by the time that people were out there, everybody was upset about homelessness then, but by then, he was president and
yeah, and the problem is most significant in LA. There's like 80,000 homeless people in LA. Yeah, it's brutal.
Yes.
And you can't do anything about that. 80,000 people.
80,000 people. Yeah, well, right. But again, I think too many people just want them gone. They don't want any money. They don't want their tax dollars spent on it. They just want them gone. And that's not going to work either. And I don't like complaining about stuff if I don't have some suggestions. I don't know that they'll work, but it's just bitching about something. But here what I would say is that there's not one answer. And because all the homeless people aren't the same. There are families who lost jobs. There are mentally ill people. There are people struggling with addiction. There are some people who just don't want to live in a house. That's a pretty small number, and we wouldn't have a homeless problem if that was all. But the ways to fix those or more groups isn't the same, right? So, if we just got them into housing, everything would be fine. Well, no. If we just got them all jobs, if we just got them, it's, and I don't think some people realize how close they might be to homelessness. I think about how I'm so lucky. For me to be homeless, I would have to lose everything I own, and all my family members would have to lose everything they own, because we would all just go to each other's houses, not friends. People who have farms we could live. I'm just so far from homelessness, but that's not true for everybody. Some people, there's nobody else except them. They don't have a family or whatever to support them.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as I was driving here today, about how fortunate I am to have a body that works, to have a mind that works, to have the ability to work and make money. There's a lot of factors that go into just being a regular person that isn't in some sort of mental institute for some reason, isn't sleeping on the streets, isn't committing crimes.
Yeah. And I was lucky growing up. Everybody's family has whatever issues they have. But I never came home from school wondering if my parents had been deported. From the time I was 5 years old, my mother took me to school the first day. And then after that, I walked to school by myself, 5 years old. And I went and looked it up on a map. It was where I lived a long time ago, just to see how far it was.
Yeah.
And it was about 0.6 miles.
And you were 5 years old?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody just walked it. And I was never afraid because I was in a safe place. It's not as though nothing, people got hit by cars. Stuff happened, but not really very much. I didn't live in fear very much. Right? Did bad things happen in our family when we were growing up? Yeah, my mom almost died, then had a chronic disease. But we had grandparents who came and took care of us. We always had a house to live in. We had food. So lucky. My parents had both gone to college. I was going to go to college. I paid for it myself back when you could do that. Gosh, the opportunities I've had. There's a lot of people who have those, and they still think that they're screwed.
It's such a weird scenario to just be who you are, because you could be born anywhere at any point in time. You could be born in the Congo and have to mine cobalt for batteries for Teslas. Like, there's so many different possibilities.
Yeah.
And I don't know that people fully recognize that all the time. Like, you're not always fully responsible for where you are. Just being born underneath the two people you were born to, that can dictate almost everything.
A few times I've gotten into yelling arguments are with some people, particularly well-off white males who were saying, if people just visualized it, if they just tried hard, they could be anything they want to be. And I'm like, that's insane. Should we just go to pick your favorite war-torn country right now and just tell those people to just think their way out of it? Just sends me around the bend. Yeah. Which is why, as I get older, I'm a socialist. I vote Democrat because that's how it is. I have to register as a Democrat here, but I am truly a socialist. And are you ready for this? Open all the borders all the time. Just open them. Our founding fathers could not imagine having closed borders. That just wasn't a thing. Well, they'll all just flood here. No, they won't. Most people like to live where they live, to be honest. They really do. They like where they live. We've screwed up some neighboring countries. That's why they're coming here. But I was born about 80 miles north of an artificial line. And so I'm an American. I did nothing to be an American. I didn't serve in the military. I did nothing. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I have the right to tell other people where they can go, how they can work. That's just amazing to me. I was so lucky. That's all. Nothing. I didn't do anything to have all these advantages. Mm-hmm. Growing up, I've worked since then, but I didn't do anything. How is that fair?
Do you think borders are necessary anyway? Anywhere?
I've realized I'm apparently not like most other people. No, I find it so weird. I find countries bizarre. I just find them weird. I don't get it.
Do you think that we could survive if all the states broke their lines?
So this is something I've been thinking about more in the last 6 years, about the United States and whether or not it will survive. It's too big and complex. The United States, just the United States, it is big. Like all of Europe, how many countries are there? And we are just one country. And if you've traveled around the United States, when you go to different places, it's different. Sometimes you feel like you're in a different country.
For sure.
And you went to New Orleans. I have been there and not been able to understand what people were saying. So it's, even though we're all speaking English, I don't think the United States is governable as currently configured. I don't see how you do it.
I don't see that either, but that's the thing, is that if we, and I'm not a proponent of anything, I'm just throwing out ideas. Ideally, we didn't have a border anywhere and people could just
move around
and be okay. The problem is there's so many different opinions on the right way to do it.
I know. I say that it won't happen. In the United States, I think you might have to add another border. I wonder if, I say this, adding another layer of government, which is crazy, but maybe we need regional, because there's there's states, but there's also regions that have some similar issues. And maybe if there was something between each state and just this federal government where 435 people are going to decide for everybody, I don't care how hard they try. If they're all with the very best of intentions, I don't know how you do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had this conversation with my uncle who's a Buddhist and just full of love, and he doesn't like anything that's divisive, like most of us. And I'm always just like, well, let Texas secede. Let the West Coast become, what is the thing? Cascadia. Let that happen. Let's see where people go, and let's see how things turn out. But there are people who are so stuck on the idea of the 50 of us remaining as a thing. It's blasphemy to talk about splitting it up. But I'm kind of like, let's see what happens.
It is interesting because I was born when it was not 50 yet.
Yeah.
So we got to keep it at 50. It's like, it hasn't been 50 that long. Just saying. So there's no reason why it has to be 50. It could be 51 or 52, or it could be 12. There's, I'm one of those, like, Texas wants to secede. Fine. Half of Oregon wants to join Idaho. Good luck with that. Mm-hmm. I'm fine with it. They might be surprised when they join Idaho. Well, and I have Cascadia patches on things. Yes.
I think both sides would be surprised.
Yes.
I think I don't really subscribe to either side. I have a lot of left-leaning principles, but I'm more of just like somewhere in between. And I'm kind of like, think there's too much animosity, and I think there's too much of people trying to say we're right, you're wrong. And I kind of just want to be like, let's see. If Texas thinks they're right, let's see.
Yeah.
If Cascadia thinks they're right, let's see.
Give it a shot and see how it works.
Yeah, you can't figure it out. I mean, because if those two things did happen, there's some stuff that Texas is going to be like, oh God, we miss being a part of the United States. Cascadia is going to say the same thing.
That's right.
Maybe every homeless person in the country moves to Cascadia.
Yes.
And because they're so lax on rules and laws and everything, it just becomes flooded with homeless people.
Yes, it's just anarchy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Neither side is right.
Right.
It's not all 100% one way.
This is so interesting you say this. I've said a number of times that the only time I know that the person I'm talking to is wrong, absolutely wrong, about monetary policy or borders or whatever, is if they start whatever they're going to say by saying, it's simple. We just need to, and then I know they're wrong. That's the only time I can guarantee that they're wrong.
Yeah.
This is it. It's very difficult to figure out a good governing system for 8 billion people on Earth. It just is. But I said I was a socialist. I'm actually a libertarian socialist. You said you're sort of the middle. I'm at both far ends. And if you go far enough, you actually meet on the other side. That's what I say.
Yeah.
And I say that because we need some labels. But I'm kind of, I don't know. I am discouraged right now. Although I will say on Tuesday, going into this last Tuesday, Election Day, I said afterwards, I said it was sort of like, I feel like, oh, I've got to go in for a root canal today. And then when it was over, it was like, okay, that wasn't so bad. And the part that made me the happiest was not that the Democrats are going to keep the Senate or whatever happened. My happiest part was hearing all the losers concede. That sounds terrible, but that's how it's supposed to work, right? I'm always, it's so weird to say proud to be an American when you haven't done anything except be born here. But my proudest moment has always been Inauguration Day, when the previous president sat, even if they lost, sat there with the person who's being sworn in, because that doesn't happen in so many countries. It has to be a death or an overthrow.
Well, and typically they write a note and leave it on the desk, right?
Right. Yes. And invite them over for tea.
Yeah.
And so we had a little bit where that didn't happen. But hearing all these people who lost their elections give concession speeches, that's how it works.
Yeah.
You lose, you lose.
Yeah.
And so that heartened me a bit, that with where people are going, wait a minute, yeah, that was a weird time, and we've got to get back to what we do here.
Be cool.
Because I also said that I don't know why we pledge allegiance to the flag, because I think it's cloth. I'm not joking. I think we should pledge allegiance to the Constitution, because it's an amazing document, and it is unparalleled on earth, to be honest.
It's a good document, but the inability to change any part of it is going to ruin us.
It is. And what's weird is that we changed it a lot up until the 70s.
Oh, you're right. Because
when I started high school, I couldn't have voted when I finished high school, but I could. Yes. But there were flurries, several flurries of changes. But now, yes, it seems to be impossible to do anything. But it's still a pretty good document compared to even constitutions in other countries. It's pretty cool.
It's good stuff. I just wish they could change it a little bit more here and there. It seems too rigid right now, which the whole point was to make it difficult for some individual to come in and change everything. Yeah.
Yes.
But I don't know that anybody ever perceived us being where we are right now.
Couldn't have.
Yeah.
The people who wrote that, there were less than 1 million people. In this little strip of land along the East Coast. They didn't even know what was in between. They literally did not know what was there. So could they have nobody could imagine this. Which is why they actually, though, they were did have some foresight to make it possible to change the Constitution. And there are people arguing that we need a constitutional convention. Will it happen? I don't know. Because that's what we need to stop doing. Just could we get one amendment through? How about we get all together and just take a look?
Well, part of the problem is you have people in power that would be required to initiate some of that change, and they're not going to do that.
Of course not.
Because first off, I think there should be some sort of term limit for everyone, and there should be an age limit too.
Yes, there should.
You should not be
tottering
80 years old
yeah.
in Congress.
Yeah.
Because
or on the Supreme Court.
Yeah. No. Yeah. What is it's a life appointee, right?
It's a life appointee. Yeah. And again, when the founding fathers wrote this, they really didn't imagine people living that long.
Right?
It was fine because, and the only thing I would say about term limits, which I'm a fan of, is they have to be long enough and staggered enough that you don't lose all institutional memory. You don't want to have an entirely brand new Congress every 6 years where nobody has ever been here before. Mm-hmm. That will not go well. Mm-hmm. So there should be term limits. They should be longer, I think, than some people might think, because you do want you want continuity and new blood. You want both of those things, right?
You want youth too.
Yes, new blood was my I suppose it could be somebody older. Yes. Again, when I was a little kid, the first president I remember was the youngest president ever.
JFK?
Mm-hmm. I remember that. And there was kind of a youth movement. Well, in the 60s, there was a youth movement. And now, boy, I look at Congress, I'm like, it's like looking at like the crypt keeper. And they're just, they don't even know anything else. They've been there so long. This is what they do. And they're not giving it up for nothing. Mm-hmm. And it's just calcified in there.
Yeah, it's not a good system because the amount of stress, one, for being the president, and two, for any other position up in that branch, the amount of stress that you have to deal with is not good for any person, let alone somebody who is in retirement age. When you're 80 years old, you should be chilling at home with your grandkids.
That's right.
And
being part of that old former president's club. Because they have done some things in the past where you can talk to them. They're around because they are not so old that they died immediately after they down. But yeah, if you look at every single president when they started and when they ended, they look way older than 4 or 8 years older.
Yeah, they always look haggard. I mean, even Obama.
Yeah, and he looked pretty youthful, right? Mm-hmm. And then it was like, what happened there? Oh yeah, president. So yes, we did, but the people, they're just so ingrained in there and they won't give it up.
Yeah. Well, and I think the majority of people who attempt to be in one of those positions are not even the people you really want. It inspires a weird personality to go for that.
And even more so now, there's a conservative writer named P.G. O'Rourke. I don't know if you ever read it. He wrote a book called Parliament of Whores. And there's a great sentence in there that just says, we have the government we deserve. And especially now, this really started when there was television and more of that, is the only people who are going to run are the people who are willing to have that kind of scrutiny that they didn't used to have. Maybe they should have, but it just, every part of their lives, moment by moment. Early in the United States, you could just walk up to the White House and knock on the door, and the first lady would answer it.
Yeah,
they were just people.
Yeah, they used to throw parties.
That's what they wanted it to be, right? But now the only people who are willing to go through that are, I don't know if they're egomaniacs, but you have to have an incredibly healthy ego and apparently very little shame to be able to put up with what it takes to get there.
Well, I also don't think that you can make it that far without compromising who you are.
Right.
Like, I think Obama was a great president, but I don't think he didn't do anything wrong.
That's right.
I don't think he's not getting money
That's
from
right.
people.
Exactly.
Citizens
no way.
United, I mean, that was probably one of the worst things that could ever happen to our country. And there's no way they're going to take that back now. You can give as much money as you want to anyone, and it doesn't matter.
And you don't even have to be a person
No.
to do it.
No.
Now, that was one of the, when I was in law school and reading, all sorts of opinions, the ones that annoyed me the most were Antonin Scalia's because they were so good. And I would think, darn it, I don't want it to end this way, but this is so good. But then I read two after I was, that I feel like it was like a pod person took him over and wrote these. And that was Bush v. Gore and Citizens United. Because not only didn't I like the way they came out, when you read his reasoning, it's like, where did Antonin Scalia go? Because he was so good. He would write these opinions and you're like, legally, you're right. I wish it wasn't true, but it is right. But those two were garbage. I was shocked because even though I didn't agree with them, I had respect for him because he was smart and he did follow the law. But those two were just garbage. It was and they both had just lasting effects.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine talking about it when it went down, because I think it was in 2011, 2010, somewhere in the last 15 years or so.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that it was going to be that big a deal. And this guy is like super conspiracy theorist and very vocal about all things political. And I'm like, whatever, he's just talking about it. And no, that was a huge deal.
It was like, it's over now.
Yeah.
This is not our America anymore.
No.
There was, you can still do local, right? People, I mean, there's, if you're the mayor of Forest Grove, you probably got elected the mayor of Forest Grove, and you are really responsive because the people will come to your house. But at the national, or even state and national level, there's so much dark money.
Yeah.
You have, and people are pulling levers. Then because there are people now, we talked about the amount of money that's concentrated in a very few people. They're the ones who are deciding. Just those people, they decide.
Yeah.
And you don't even know who they are. We're not even talking about the Koch brothers. We're talking about people whose names you've never heard.
Yeah, it's a bummer, because then it really makes you feel like, unless there's a third party, fourth party, fifth party, or some dramatic change to the way we do it, I don't feel like it really matters. I feel like they're all compromised above the city level, like what you're saying.
Right. Very local, they're not. But
Senator, governor,
Yep.
representatives. I feel like there's no way I couldn't run for one of those positions and not take money from someone.
Well, you could,
win.
but then you wouldn't win, right?
Yeah.
You do, so anybody who actually really has that, they don't win, and then you're done. I think there are a handful of people in the House of Representatives who are from certain districts that who are not rich, haven't taken a lot of money just because they could get elected because they're from a small state without very many people in it. Right. And you could, but most of them, no, and no senators. There's just no way. And so, you're not really getting to vote for who you might want to vote for. And the other thing was, our founding fathers did not anticipate a two-party system. They actually did not. And the two-party system with primaries, you don't even get to vote who you want to anyway, unless you have ranked choice voting. Maybe we'll get that, because that does flip the script a little bit.
I haven't heard of that. Ranked
choice. So there, in the primary, or depending if it's a regular election, because when you vote, you often see that you've only heard of two candidates for this, but there's actually 5 names on there. So in ranked choice, you would rank them. Okay, so then they would tally all the first all the number ones. And if somebody gets a majority there, then they win because nobody else, doesn't matter what else you'll do, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll then take whoever got the last one, who got the lowest number of votes, you will take those, they get eliminated. And then you take how many people put them actually first or second or something, you move those votes into the other people, and you keep doing that until you get somebody who actually more people wanted them more than the people down here. So
it's not just an A or B decision.
Right.
I see. Yeah, I was watching something the other day, and I don't know if this is a common thing on ballots. I'd never seen it before, but they showed a ballot I believe was from a different state, and at the top it said you could check a box to vote entire ballot Republican.
Yeah.
Or vote entire ballot. And
Yeah.
I was like, seriously?
Oh, yes.
That's the worst thing ever.
Yes.
You can't just vote for R or D for every single person.
Absolutely. There are people, and it just, for some people, it just makes it easier because that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who it is.
No, that's disappointing. I mean,
it is, but there are states that do that.
To be honest, like, I don't really pay attention. You see ads and you see the signs on the side of the road and everything. When my ballot comes, I flip it over to all the initiatives.
Initiatives, yeah.
Yes. Those are the ones I'm interested in.
Right.
So I'll go through all those, and they give you a little booklet. You can read about it.
Oh, absolutely. And who is for and who is against? Always interesting. It doesn't completely sway me, but I'm curious.
Yeah, it's cool to go through those. Then I go back over and I start to vote for the people. And yeah, all those categories where there's just one person, I've never heard of them, I don't even check a box.
I don't usually, no. Yeah, it's not.
I'm not going to give my approval for someone I don't know, and they don't even have anybody running against them.
Right.
It's stupid.
Yeah, it has become, the whole system has I think become something that it was not anticipated that this is what it would be like. And no third party can break in, because it is one nice thing in some countries that have some different kinds of things with parliaments, and because they often have multiple parties, you have to form a coalition, right? No party really ever wins. It's like, well, we can only do this if we get them and them, right? So you get some others. So you'll often see there's usually coalition governments in places like the UK, Germany.
Yeah, it seems like some of those other governments have figured things out a little bit better. It seems like there's more choices in England.
Yeah, they're it's like, why can't we do that here? Well, we might be able to. It is much smaller, much more homogeneous population than we've got in the United States. So it could be, it's just. I still think we can, sort of like, well, we can't just be the UK. I'm like, no, but we could look at some of the stuff that's good, and maybe we could take that, and maybe take a little from Denmark, and maybe we could take a little from Bhutan. It's okay.
But we're the best country in the world. We're not taking anything from anybody. Well, I mean, we will take everything from everybody.
Best country. That's another one. Best. Why is that a thing?
That is a thing. I always think about it when I see pirates with their flags. You just
gotta be the best.
You always have to, even like Vikings traveling to other countries and slaughtering you gotta be the superior. It's a really weird thing, but it's ancient and it's in us. And
it actually works. It turns out I can't remember the exact number, but it might be 30% of all humans on Earth right now have can trace some of their genetic lineage to Genghis Khan, who, when the Mongols were coming across and pillaging and raping, he did a lot, and a lot of his DNA is still in us. So it works.
Yeah. I mean, he also slaughtered like 50 million people, 100 million. I think he was responsible for more death.
We have a bottleneck and what's called a founder effect with his genes. Wow. So the ones who lived, they had babies with his DNA. Yeah, interesting, huh? So also we all are carrying, Genghis Khan DNA. And let's see.
So he saved us from COVID.
Possibly. There are some, I'm pretty sure I've read that there are a few diseases that are associated with some of those variants. But yeah, I don't know what will happen. That's why I live on my little farm out in the country and because I'm lucky I get to do that. And I still teach, and try to help kids do what it is they want to do. But now I kind of just watch. And I vote, I do all the stuff I'm supposed to do, but I'm just kind of watching to see what happens. What will happen will happen. It's weird as I get older, I'm not Buddhist, but a little more of that. If you get too just engaged in one thing, then if you lose it, it's just so horrible. And just kind of, I don't know, kind of let some stuff go.
You do. You gotta let people be people, and you figure it out a little bit more. If you're smart enough to let yourself learn and admit when you fail, you will learn stuff. That's what it is.
That has been, and it is interesting. Some of that you don't get till you're older because, when you're 20, no one can tell you anything. And you have the best judgment of your whole life. Perhaps not. And yeah, that looking back on it's like, I feel like everything, all the good, all the bad, I just took it all in there, right? And you get to where you're at, which is hopefully you're a little more at peace with what will happen. I do feel bad sometimes for some of my students who are young, because I will die before a lot of the things get as bad as they're going to get. But maybe they'll figure some stuff out.
Hopefully.
Or not.
Yeah.
And that's the way it goes. I can't.
The earth don't care.
It doesn't. Don't have to stop saving the earth. You can stop saving the earth. The earth is good.
Yeah.
The earth is fine. They'd probably be fine without the cockroaches that are the humans crawling all over the surface.
Yep. Okay, well, I think that's a good spot to end it.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. This was fun.